Nachi free.
Welcome to all of you deplorables. My opponent slanders you as deplorable and irredeemable. Boy, that second word is tough. You don't hear that as much. But that means you're never going to come back, folks. And I know you're going to come back. We're going to come back so strong.
Don't let the cap fool you. I'm still voting for Gary Johnson. And I don't care if people tell me that's a wasted vote. I vote for what I believe in. And I don't believe in this corrupt, disingenuous, power-hungry shrew. And much less do I believe in this equally disingenuous, bombastic billionaire bully. I wouldn't trust either of them to tell me the time of day. However, having attended a Donald Trump rally here in Miami, I can see how people get swept into his literally trumped-up speeches. And to be fair, it was an inspiring speech. In a weird way, I felt like I was at some historical event. He even had me cheering a couple times when he talked about Cuba and the freeing of political prisoners, like the relatives I know that languished for decades in this monster's gulags for political reasons only.
Buriako, Shamalangozi.
You're right, Scully. Let me not get sidetracked. And I have to admit, I didn't see any of his supporters as deplorable and much less irredeemable. They're good people who do care about the future of this country, and I'm not just saying that to virtue signal and score brownie points with family and friends that are voting for Trump. Though there's no one I know who believes in him the way these supporters do. None of my family, friends, or co-workers were at the rally. I actually found out about it the same morning from a friend who was warning me about the inevitable traffic jam. But I took a good look around the auditorium and it was full of people cheering him on. Granted, the tickets were free. But I remember being at that same auditorium when I was 16 to see one of my favorite rock bands, Metallica. And I realized, wow, this is the same power of celebrity I felt back then. Trump is like a rock star. And that, of course, is the danger. He knows how to appeal to people's emotions. And let's be honest, most of us are not always rational. It's not in our nature. And this was ever so evident once the rally was over and I stepped outside. Now here's where I believe most of the media distorts the reality of what actually goes on in and outside the Trump rallies. Not to blame the media too much, after all many of them are good people too, at least the ones in the field. However, the seven-figure salary earning anchors, not so much. But the camera crews, the writers, the editors, the people behind the scenes, they're good people. I've interned at a local news station and immediately I saw the class difference between those people and the anchors. I don't want to generalize, but the anchors tended to be arrogant, entitled, pompous assholes, which is why it chafes my ass to hear some of them talk about inequality and corporatism while they rake in seven-figure salaries from corporations. And they're not entrepreneurs. They could take bigger pay cuts so everyone else gets a raise, but they usually don't. But I'll save that for another video. Getting back to the difference between what gets reported and what actually happens, whenever I would see the news coverage of a Donald Trump rally, I got the impression that all Trump supporters were violent, racist idiots. But look at the thousands of people at this rally. I didn't do a head count, but I would figure about 95% peacefully exited the auditorium and went about their business. It was only about a few dozen Trump supporters that remained outside to engage with the protesters. And hanging around these deplorable people is where I realized, these are the diehards, both the supporters and the protesters. These are people who I don't want to judge the way I'm blaming the mainstream media for doing, but let's face it, they're not exercising the best judgment. I found it hilarious to see how any of these people thought they were going to change the other side's mind in less than 10 minutes by yelling at each other.
This is what democracy looks like! This is what democracy looks like! This is what democracy looks like!
I disagree. This is not what a democracy looks like. A real democracy involves rationally discussing and voting for laws and policies, especially at the local level. Getting involved in your community, attending local municipality hearings and keeping our elected officials on their toes, not burning everything down because you've been promised by misleading politicians that everything can be free. What I saw outside the Trump rally were a bunch of passionate people who I can see truly care about our country's future, but who are so caught up in their emotions that they're just spinning their wheels. Out of respect for some of these people and out of fear of a lawsuit, I don't want to show their faces, but a couple of situations I witnessed are worth mentioning. There was one Trump supporter who started yelling at a Trump protester that they're the ones causing all the violence. And he was just yelling, "You're causing all the violence! It's you people, man! It's you people always doing this!" And I was like, dude, it's kind of ironic that you're saying that. And I thought I was going to have to get involved until fortunately a police officer came in and diffused the situation without having to touch anyone. By the way, my hat's off. Okay, to the police officers who managed to ensure that none of the few outbreaks got out of hand. Another situation that I thought was hilarious was some white woman lecturing a young black Trump supporter about racism. Really? Your lily white ass is going to explain to a black man about racism. I thought she was going to start patting him on the head. Oh, you poor thing, let me adopt you. And I remember asking him, hey, dude, sorry, but with all due respect, I mean, what do you think about a white woman lecturing you about racism? And he was like, man, dude, I am so tired of this bullshit. I just don't know what to say. And this is why we supposedly have a problem with institutionalized racism. Thanks to mainstream media outlets that keep stoking that fire, and then the white liberals and Democrats, because that's usually who drinks the systemic race-baiting Kool-Aid, they keep fueling the divide, with the best of intentions, of course. It's funny, when the Trump protesters started yelling Black Lives Matter, it was a white guy who was yelling Black Lives Matter the loudest. And as toxic and destructive as I find that movement to be, I didn't engage them either. And to their credit, they were peaceful, actually. I can't even say they were officially a chapter or whatever. They weren't pushing people around. They were just making themselves heard. And lastly, one of the other people who I would love to mention are the actual t-shirt vendors, particularly the woman who I bought this cap from. Very lovely lady whose picture I'd rather not show, but here's one of her shirts. She actually works as a nurse, but her and her husband do this part-time, and they've been following the campaign around the country. And so I asked her about all the violence, which I was actually hoping to see. And she said that since Bernie Sanders dropped out of the race, the rallies have been a lot more calm. According to her, it was the Bernie people who were instigating violence to the point of harassing and even stealing from the vendors. And supposedly at one of the rallies, they burned down a vendor's tent. And I don't remember seeing that reported in the mainstream news, like on CNN or MSNBC, and much less the Huffington fucking Post. You're right, Scully. Let me keep this classy. And so I bought this hat from her for my cousin who asked me to buy him one. And one of the Trump protesters saw me walking around with it, and she was like, you bought that? And just to avoid an argument with her, I actually said, no, it's for my cousin. I'm voting for Gary Johnson. And still, she was so self-righteous, almost pathologically indignant, that she just kept huffing and puffing like... And I found that attitude to be quite deplorable, especially her handwriting on the sign and the psychology behind that absolute refusal to engage in a peaceful conversation. That is irredeemable. There's no getting through that level of political divide. But that's her right, though. Free country. Unlike in Cuba, where peaceful protests end up like this. And these women, Las Damas de Blanco, are not just protesting a candidate they falsely accuse of being racist. They're risking their lives for their relatives in prison for political reasons only, thanks to this walking, talking tumor. And then you get Colin Kaepernick wearing him on a shirt while on a crusade to speak out against oppression in this country as he earns millions of dollars for throwing around a football and wearing pig-themed socks in a year where close to a dozen police officers have been murdered thanks to Black Lives Matter's false narrative. By the way, police officers who don't get paid anywhere near what Colin Kaepernick or these journalists get paid. But that's the paradox of freedom and a free market in this great country of ours that's already great without Donald Trump. And that's why I'm voting for Gary Johnson. Thanks for watching.
Homegrown.